You know how sometimes your brain gets stuck, like a hamster on a wheel, constantly spinning without getting anywhere? Or like you're trying to refresh the same web page that just won't load. That's overthinking. So do you recognize that? Do you also sometimes get caught up in overthinking? For example, by replaying past events or worrying about things that haven't even come true yet? That's probably because you take your thoughts too seriously and rely on overthinking as a way to solve problems in life. But doing so usually comes with its own consequences. For example, having a negative impact on our mental health. So what if I told you there's a type of therapy that doesn't so much focus on the content of your thoughts, but instead focuses on how it is that you think to help you overcome overthinking? And it is creating really interesting results. So today we're going to be talking about metacognitive therapy, in short, MCT, to understand what it is, how it exactly helps you overcome mental health problems, and what are some of the questions that still remain. Metacognitive therapy is basically a talk therapy, but with a twist. It doesn't focus on the contents of your thoughts. It doesn't look into your past or analyzes what it is that you think exactly and why that is. Instead, it focuses on unhelpful thinking patterns that people usually tend to use in order to deal with unhelpful thoughts and feelings. Some of these unhelpful patterns are called worry and rumination and paying too much attention to threats. And these thinking patterns seem to be keeping problems like anxiety and depression going. For example, in anxiety, a big problem is the over-reliance on worry to solve problems and prepare for the future, and spending a lot of time monitoring for threats and keeping an eye out for danger. It can be internal threats, like certain unwanted thoughts or unwanted emotions and sensations, or outside, it can be certain situations that we think are dangerous. However, these unhelpful thinking habits, thinking strategies, maintain anxiety and keep the problem going. Metacognitive therapy focuses on breaking those habits. So when a client comes in and I identify how they spend time on these unhelpful thinking strategies, like worrying and ruminating and keeping an eye out for threats, I specifically focus on helping them understand why they're doing so. And usually it has something to do with these ideas they have developed about how worrying and overthinking helps them overcome problems in life. Take Sarah, a former client of mine. Sarah was worrying a lot and she was suffering from anxiety. And she had come to this idea, this belief that worrying was a helpful way to prepare for anything. So whenever there were any problems, real or imagined, she would rely on worrying as a way to solve this problem and prepare for anything terrible that would come. But when we examined this worry, this relationship with worry, she quickly realized how worrying was not helpful at all. In fact, it made her feel tired, burned out, and most importantly, it maintained her anxiety. So over the course of therapy, she was buying less and less into this idea that worrying was a helpful strategy to deal with problems in life. And once she changed her mind about this idea that worrying was helpful, she slowly reduced the amount of time she spent worrying. As a good consequence, her anxiety dropped. And if she needed it, she would use focused problem solving as a way to solve problems rather than relying on worrying to do so. MCT therapists can help you overcome this tendency to overthinking and help you no longer buy into this idea that worrying is helpful, that analysis and dwelling on things is a helpful way to understand and solve problems. And on top of that, a skilled therapist can help you develop a more relaxed relationship to these thoughts that you usually spend time worrying about. And you start seeing thoughts for what they are, fleeting inner events. Think of it like realizing you don't have to chase every car that drives by your house. You can just watch it pass without running after it. So why are people, clients and therapists alike, so excited about metacognitive therapy? Well, first and foremost, it is really effective. I personally have never worked with a method that is so effective in helping my clients overcome mental problems like anxiety and depression, for example. So one of the important things about MCT that makes it so interesting is that it is based on a solid theory of what makes people mentally ill. And there is research showing that rumination and worry and keeping an eye out for threats is part of the problem. Also, it has been shown to help with anxiety and depression, and in some instances, even performing better than cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. So when a client comes in to get metacognitive therapy, they can be sure that the strategies that they're learning are tested and proved to work on what they're supposed to be working on, and they are effective in reducing overthinking. Of course, as with any other method, there are some questions that still needs to be answered. And one is that we don't know exactly how this works in the brain and what are the long-term effects. Do people continue to have this change and relaxed relationship with their brain, or do they go back to their old habits? Long-term follow-up studies have shown that people continue to maintain the status of improvement, and they continue to improve 9 years after concluding therapy, so 9 years after therapy. But you do really need a skilled therapist to help you and guide you implement the strategies in a correct way. Applying the strategies and techniques of MCT without having the proper context and without the proper understanding of why you're doing so may not be very effective. In fact, it could end up as another unhelpful set of strategies that could lead to more overthinking in the long term. So, is metacognitive therapy, MCT, effective? The evidence so far says yes, especially for anxiety and depression, but there is still more to learn. If you've ever felt trapped in overthinking, MCT might be a good approach to explore, especially with a skilled and certified metacognitive therapist. Thank you for watching.